All right, everybody, we're back. It is November 4th, 2022. Brigadoon Radio. We're here with Gerald Ashley. Gerald, how you doing, buddy? What's happening? Tell me something funny.
Well, I can't. Something funny. I don't know. I think of lots of pessimistic things to talk about. Um, it seems funny over here, but isn't. And so this is a nice softball for you. Donald Trump running in 2024, starting to look more serious, isn't it?
Well, here we go. So we're under a week away from the U.S. election. Midterm is happening. I think he announces on November 15th, which is, between the election and between Thanksgiving holiday. Sure, why not? Get back in the game. And also, he wants to announce before he's probably going to get indicted by another government entity. But yeah, it's all on. It's all happening. I would say the next 3 weeks are going to be political craziness, which could be a lot of fun. But for all intents and purposes, 2024 is on. It's going to happen.
Right.
It's happening. And as soon as the votes are counted on this election, it is 2024 election season. And I think not only will Trump announce, but I think between the two parties, you're going to have 59 other candidates. I think it is going to be the greatest election we've ever seen in 2024. But before we get there, we got to go through 2022.
Yeah, I'm getting this vision of the Keystone Cops, that there'll be a lot of people running around and bumping into one another. And is it a really wide open horse race here? Somebody that's not familiar even in the States and certainly not internationally likely to come through, perhaps?
Yeah, I think if you look at, the Democratic field is very unsettled. I mean, if Joe Biden doesn't run for election, which I actually don't think he's going to, and he has to decide by February 2023 if he's going to do that. And there's not a lot of desire for our vice president to run. So I think you got a wide open field on the Democrat side. Most of the Democrat leadership is well into their 80s. So there's plenty of folks that are in their 40s, 2 generations behind, that are keen to run.
There's a whole generation that's missed out, which are the guys in their 60s, is it? Because you've had a lot of people in their 80s who've been bed blocking, for want of a better phrase. And so it could be a big generational change then in the next election.
I just think it's all up for grabs. And then on the Republican side, Trump is the gorilla, but there's not a lot of appetite. I think if you talk to like legitimate Republican donors, call them political elites, people that know what's really going on. Sure, he gets out the votes, but, it would be great to have somebody maybe with Trump's instincts without all the chaos, all the craziness. That's why Ron DeSantis, the current governor of Florida, is getting so much interest and so much buzz. But I think we're looking at a big transformational election, which is kind of exciting. The age thing, you're spot on, and we're going to talk about later. We're entering a pretty crazy world economy, and America's probably ripe for political revolution.
And are we going to see? Are we going to see the Republicans sweep back next week? Do you think? Or
I'll just give you a quick macro overview. So generally, going into midterm elections, that is elections between presidential elections. The party that is out of the White House tends to do better. So that would suggest the Republicans are going to do well. Other trends, typically more Republicans vote in these kind of midterm elections than Democrats. That's another positive for the Republicans. Biden is not the most exciting guy in the world. Another positive for the Republicans. And the fourth, just kind of the general malaise of the economy, what's really happening. There's just like anxiety around China, etc. So that all favors the Republicans. But that being said, I think the Senate is going to be it's a complete toss-up. I think if the Republicans had better candidates in, say, Georgia, in Pennsylvania, they would probably win those races. But they've got some real wackadoodles in those 2 states. So the Senate is a toss-up, could go either way. The House of Representatives clearly is going to go for the Republicans. The real question there is the size of it. For me, on election night, my favorite night of the year, there's 5 races I'm really going to be watching, and they're really kind of driven by the kind of East Coast. We should know pretty soon, say 8, 9 p.m., what's going to happen. If you look at the Florida Senate and governor's race, both Rubio is going to win the Senate race, DeSantis is going to win the governor's race. But really what I'm looking for there is the size of the win. Is it a double-digit win? Is it 10, 12, 15-point win?
Right.
If that shows you there's huge Republican excitement. And then 3 Senate races. The Ohio Senate race, J.D. Vance is favored in that. He's a Republican. But if he somehow loses, that's a good sign for the Democrats. And then you got Pennsylvania, which is a total toss-up. Fetterman and Emmett Oz. Whoever wins that is probably going to control the Senate, frankly. And then the Georgia Senate race. Those are kind of 3 races. And then from the House side, getting back to this kind of intensity and energy, I think looking at races north of the Potomac River. So, races in, say, New Jersey, New York State, even Massachusetts. If those start, those are solidly blue Democrat,
Sure.
If those start switching to Republicans, you could be looking at a tsunami kind of situation.
Really?
Big wave. So those are the kind of the races to look at. But just as an overcap, Senate total toss up. House of Representatives going for the Republicans. Question is how big. And then I think shortly after that, you're going to have people deciding if they're going to run for president pretty quickly for 2024.
So we've got and it's November 24, isn't it? So we've got 2 years of mayhem.
2 years of mayhem, but our process is fantastically beautiful. It goes on forever. The first caucuses, the first primaries will happen in as early as probably late January 23, early February 2023. That's why I'm saying, Biden really's got to decide, I think, by February 2023. That would give him a year to raise money and kind of let other people compete. So, the next 90 days, people are really going to be deciding if they're going to run for president in November 2024. Democracy in America never stops. It is a long, crazy process. So yeah, it's a multi-month effort.
One quick outsider's question. You mentioned Florida, and there's a governorship race. Are all the states got governorship races, or are they split up over time?
They're all split up. Yeah, every state has their own kind of system. I would have to. I don't know. I'm going to guess like there's probably 25, 26 governor's races. Right. This year. Where I live in Virginia, Virginia and New Jersey vote on odd years, the 1 year after the presidency, which is kind of interesting. But every state has their own rules. The only general all chamber that is up for elections is the House of Representatives, all 435 members. The Senate, which is 100 members, only a third of them are up for election this year. So, yeah, it's easier to explain a black hole than explain the U.S. electoral system. It is totally designed not to get anything done because there's races constantly. It's a wild system.
Yeah, I mean the 2-year tenure of the House of Representatives seems incredibly short. I mean, you're no longer, you've just won and you're fighting the next election. I mean, do you get many House representatives who only end up with a 2-year term? Is that quite a churn?
So the most dangerous, the most likely flipping seats are open seats, obviously, where there's no incumbent, and then candidates within their first or second term, right? But if you're a member of Congress and you somehow won 2 or 3 races, you're probably in there for a while. And the House of Representatives is set up. The only way you can really be successful in that chamber is by having seniority. So you have to hold on. But you're spot on. If you're a freshman member of Congress, you win a big race, you come to DC, someone's like, and they're like, hey, I'm a freshman member of Congress. And people are like, yeah, we don't care. Great, good for you. So I've been here for.
You don't get to sit on House committees and things like that without seniority, basically.
You get the worst. Literally, you get the worst office space. All office space, the best views, the best office space, all done by seniority. The chairmanships, the committee assignments, all based on tenure.
This in Wall Street or New York terminology was the corner office, wasn't it? Once you got the corner office in Manhattan, you'd arrived.
You'll know the worst House office building is the Rayburn House office building. It's just very antiseptic, very sterile. Looks like a government building. You'll see a lot of new members of Congress in that building, where the power players are in Cannon, which has closer access and better views.
The new boys are kind of hot desking almost.
No, they are, which is crazy too. Because you're right. Not only are you only in for 2 years, but you could move your office. in 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's fun if you come to DC in January 2023. There's literally moving boxes all over Capitol Hill and desk, and democracy never rests.
Right.
Is the best explanation. Your office may be somewhere else within 2 years, but the freshman members of Congress, quite interesting. They get a lot of energy, a lot of attention, but they're just one of 50, 60 new people, and usually they can't do too much. So people are certainly polite to them, but the power players, especially in the House, you've got to be here for a while.
Yeah, I understand. Right. Well, that's cleared all that up. Basically,
just as a recap. So the Senate is total toss-up in play. House of Representatives going for the Republicans, and then presidential campaign starts in earnest Wednesday morning.
Okay, one last question on this topic. What's happened to Kamala Harris? She seems to have faded big time, if she ever really shone in the first place. But
I was a huge proponent. I just thought I thought Biden-Harris was like the ticket, and I felt that for a long time. And I don't know. I mean, she's just kind of vanished. She's and obviously the vice presidency doesn't really allow you to do that much. You're obviously working for somebody else. And she hasn't really spent that much time in DC. Maybe she's been here for 6 years total, plus a few years as vice president. So she doesn't have the infrastructure. She doesn't have the former staffers kind of mixed into the think tank lobbying community. And there's just not a lot of excitement for her. I don't know. And she ran kind of a lackluster campaign, but she's from California. Woman, super interesting story. I actually thought she'd be a better kind of Politico than she's displayed. And maybe she just hasn't had the opportunity to display it, but she's definitely not. She's on the back foot. She's certainly not the top Democrat going into the 2024.
Well, I guess we'll see over the next week where the first tea leaves start to shake out, I suppose.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. And if it's a really disastrous night for the Democrats, that's even more pressure on Biden to not run. As we were tweeting about, looking at the governor's races, if governors lose, if you lose the House, the Senate, governors, I mean, if it's just like a red tsunami wave, it's not good for Joe in 2024.
Sure. Right. Well, that was a nice, cheerful start, I suppose.
I think if you're a Republican, if you're Kevin McCarthy, if you're Mitch McConnell, you're feeling pretty good. If you're Ron DeSantis, Wednesday morning could be a morning in America. It could be the return of the Republicans. So we'll see. I mean, it always depends on where you're sitting and what direction. But if I was a Democrat, I would. I probably wouldn't watch TV Tuesday night. I would do something else.
Yeah, find some football or something to watch. Or that's
exactly.
Yeah, but there we go.
So that was a recap of the election 2024. Get out and vote. Vote early. Vote often. Let's talk. Let's bring it back to more. Let's go global again. The Bank of England. It basically said it's the end of the world. One of the headlines is the worst recession ever on record. It's 100 years. So we got inflation. We're talking about food, fuel, and finance. It's all coming together. What is happening? Does the Bank of England know what they're talking about? Are we on the precipice of
it's
doom and gloom?
Yeah, it's hard to be anything other than pessimistic. The only optimistic, slightly wise guy remark I can make is Bank of England predictions are normally wrong, and so perhaps it won't be. Perhaps it won't be as bad. I think, in practical terms, it's almost baked in. And the signs have been there for some time. Obviously, here in the UK, we focus a lot on the UK, but there's plenty of difficult data, certainly in the EU. I think people are coming to terms with the fact that China is slowing down, and it's just a question of how much the Communist Party of China want to reveal in the statistics, and they've become very coy. And as a sort of outsider, I'm going to make a prediction, which I think is unfolding already, that the US property market is heading for something of a crunch. The data's been looking more and more shaky since the summer in terms of properties being sold and also more property on the market. That's definitely the case in the UK. And in the UK, people have woken up to the fact that interest rates, funnily enough, are not always at 0.5% or 1%. Um, there's a lot of screaming and shouting interest rates at 3%. The 200-year average, which is maybe a slightly misleading number, is 5%. Now, some people are going around saying, well, it's still only 3%, 30 years ago it was a lot worse. But there's a huge difference. And the difference is people are far more in debt now. So actually, 3% is going to hurt because they have maxed out in every possible way in terms of mortgaging, remortgaging, and credit. And they've had a hell of a run. I mean, we're talking, 15 years of incredibly low interest rates. Many fortunes have been lost by people betting, well, interest rates can't stay down there this long. And of course they have. Everybody's got different reasons for inflation. Some people say it's Ukraine. That's a contributory factor. I think a lot of it is just all this money printing. I know Milton Friedman went out of fashion, but he must be back in fashion now because monetarist theory is saying, well, quelle surprise, you print all this money, it's going to find its way out in the system. And then the final point is I always like sort of anecdotal little things that maybe just a little straw in the wind, but was it 6 months ago we were talking about the lunacy of NFTs, where people were paying millions and millions of dollars? You and I were both bemoaning the fact we hadn't jumped on board and made our millions. Well, the whole thing has gone right the way back, virtually to zero, as far as I can see. And that was an early sign that there was lunatic amounts of money in the system that had nowhere to go or could be profitably invested in anything. This is the real issue, is that why are these dollars, pounds, yen, euros finding their way in all this lunacy? Why aren't they going into productive businesses? Well, there aren't the productive in businesses to invest in, or not currently. And, this has got to lead to a recession because things have got to rebalance. There'll be a lot of pain. Politicians are going to be screaming their heads off because, and this is more your territory than mine, but we're going to be back to how does the political cycle sink in with the economic cycle? And maybe for the US elections, that's particularly critical because if we are in for 2 years of a rough time, that pretty much sinks in with the US electoral cycle. Actually, the same in the UK, because Sunak has to have an election within almost exactly 2 years.
Right.
And where's the good news between now and the autumn of 2024? Very hard to find any.
Yeah, and I think here in the States, there's all the big kind of tech companies looking at layoffs. I mean, Stripe yesterday made a big announcement. Apple's reducing, payroll, or Lyft. So these kind of like high-flying tech companies coming back. The world famous Skyscraper Index is one to watch. Miami this week, they just broke ground on a 100-story building. Yeah. There's the famous thing whenever skyscrapers reach their peak, we've kind of reached peak monetary madness.
That actually makes a lot of sense because you think of the timeline to get the planning permission, to get everything together, and to convince financiers to invest in one of those things. By the time you've done all that, you're almost certainly halfway through the window of opportunity. Right. Then you've got to build the damn thing, and it's almost certain you're going to be at the top of a cycle. I mean, I certainly New York and in a much smaller way in London, we've got sort of standout buildings that are now full, but spent many years not being full because of that problem. I mean, we've still got a situation in London, the Shard, which is a very tall building, which I can't remember how many years it's been up now, maybe about 15, which would gel with the 08 sort of crisis. It's been up about 15 years. It is still not full 15 years later. And some of the occupants are kind of the slightly odd Middle Eastern hotel chains that nobody would normally stay in because they're the guys, the sovereign wealth funds that put up some of the money to build it. So there's some sweetheart deals on the people who are renting. So yeah, Miami going to 100 stories. I think that's all you need to know.
It's good times in FLA USA. I think so. this is kind of baked in. I think everybody feels like we're going into recession. I guess the question is, how bad it's going to be. I've heard more and more people talking about this crazy word stagflation. Hopefully,
Well,
I think the economy, it does need to go through boom and bust. Like, I'm not terribly worried about that. I do worry, you're right, about the allocation of money going to these crazy NFTs when it could have gone to chemistry or biology or something more useful. So yeah, if there's some bad stuff pushed out of the system, Stripe trying to go big and, maybe having to reduce their payroll. I don't think that, that's like the nature of business. Where it gets crazy though is, inflation, stagflation, these kind of, we just don't have a lot of money, people living paycheck to paycheck. That's where it gets a little dicey.
Okay, let's try and be slightly more optimistic. And you mentioned fuel and food. Food has been in a bad way for 18 months in terms of inflation. Quite interesting to see some of the latest wholesale data that despite the Ukraine war and all the rest of it, the wheat prices and quite separately rice prices they're pretty much down on the year and they're back to levels of 18 months ago. So maybe that food impetus is not as grim as it was. And certainly fuel, and I think I'm right in saying this, in the States is kind of back to normal levels, almost normal levels. The UK, we're suffering a bit because of the weakness of sterling. So petrol was 135 pence a litre, and it's now like 160. Pretty much a lot of that is probably the decline of sterling. So you could say that a lot of these things are rebalancing. But the thing that I think remains a big worry, or two big worries, firstly, the amount of indebtedness, and can people service that debt? And secondly, we used to comfortably congratulate ourselves, 3, 4, 5 years ago, saying, well, the US is the consumer of choice and China is the consumer of, the manufacturer of choice. So you've got a manufacturing engine in China and you've got a consumer engine in the United States. And in fact, the historian Neil Ferguson came up with a slightly clunky term of Chimerica, whereas this idea that there was a sort of inseparable twins that were going to drive the global economy. Well, that's dead and gone, I think.
Well, I don't know what's dead and gone. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be as easy to decouple from the world, but I do think I'm optimistic. I'm hoping that this is a positive, hopefully it won't be too bad. We can come out of it. I think what's dangerous is the politics of it, as you point out. Both Biden and Rishi, Germany's got this weird coalition government. I think if you knew you were coming into a recession, would you rather have a government who had 4 years to sort it out or 2 years? I think when you have 2 years, politicians make some really poor decisions, purely political, which aren't good economically. So it could set us further back. So I don't know. It could be a bit of a rocky road, but
I think it's a bit like the quotation from Hemingway, character in one of his books. I can't remember which one, but it's a famous quote where he says, with bankruptcy, first it is very slow and then it comes suddenly. And I think a lot of people are in debt and are worrying now, and this might just be enough to push a lot of people into difficulty. And governments are not exactly flush with cash to do anything about it. As the British government found, you can't just splash cash around. It's got to come, in our case, mainly from foreign bondholders, and they demand a higher price, and so you don't square that circle. So there's no easy medicine available from the government to ease this pain, I don't think.
Servicing debt, yeah. I think you're spot on with that. It's a devil. It's just there every day, right? It doesn't matter how much more you sell or, servicing debt is a huge challenge. That is really probably the space to watch, not only with governments but also corporates. The end of free money is done, and we're entering a crazy period, and money only matters when you need it. And if you need to service a debt, you need to serve. It could be a problem.
It's like oxygen. When you've got it, you don't think about it.
Right.
When you haven't got it, you can't think about anything else. I'm going to slightly finesse my blunt remark about Chimerica and China-US trade being finished. What I mean is, I think that rather close, cozy, a sort of utopian vision of the global economy is gone. The global economy I think, is going to be fracturing a bit, depends how much, more on political lines. And so the politics of the next 5-10 years are going to, well, it's a two-way street, aren't they? They're going to both shape economies and be shaped by them. But I get the feeling that the setups are slightly changing in some of these.
I think it depends on what you're selling. Like if you're selling a Volkswagen car, I think you're still in a good space. If you're selling technology, that's where it's going to get a little dicey. I think the commodity stuff is still a play. But I wouldn't totally shut down Chimerica yet. I don't know. People like blue jeans, and people like the NBA. People like Premier League soccer. So I don't know. It can't be all doom and gloom.
No, equally, I think we're not going to go back to a world where it was a tremendously deflationary engine. Because
that's a good point.
And that, I think, is politically not acceptable, because certainly I think in the UK and the US, that has been a huge pressure on wages. I mean, basically wages in the UK, overall total earnings after inflation, are flat since the early 2000s. People don't like that, and they're going to vote accordingly.
Yeah, and it does seem the things that are going to matter in the future, and that the future could be 2 months away. I mean, like chips, raw materials, commodities, those are only going to get more expensive. So the downstream impact on that is going to be quite negative for consumers.
So I think we can be sackcloth and ashes now for 3 or 6 months and see if the new year or the second quarter of next year sees any slight turn. And the best turn I think we can hope for is inflation does start to recede quite well, and that corporate earnings get better. But at the moment, the market is not very optimistic. That said, stock markets do look forward, and this is going to be a brave and stupid thing to say, but I think maybe the equity markets are going to get out of their sort of bear feeling. At one point, FTSE been down 20% this year, many indices more, certainly Hang Seng. Wall Street is, particularly the tech sector, has been badly hurt. And I just wonder, on the basis that stock markets look forward, maybe they're doing what we're doing now and saying perhaps the second quarter of next year things will be a bit brighter. So don't be surprised if the stock market is going up, whilst the economic news at the short end of timeframes is still pretty grim. A bit cynical, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's a reaction.
Well, yeah, and time horizons matter too, right? I mean, like I said, if you need money today, it's probably not too great. But if you're betting on the future, 10, 15 years out, you can be bullish.
Yeah.
That's the rub. But either way, it's exciting, right?
Yeah, there's plenty of things we can predict and get wrong over future editions, if they still allow us to be on this show.
I think we'll be allowed. What do you mean? Do you know something I don't know? Anyway.
Well, I couldn't comment. No, I never know anything.
It's a need to know situation. All right, need to know. Let's talk about. I've got a glare here. Missile test. The Rocket Man is back at it. North Korea.
Yeah,
what a week.
Back, and
one of the rockets. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, and kind of feels more serious than some of our sometimes lighthearted remarks. I mean, one of the
rockets I read this week actually landed in Japanese territory, and they had a national holiday on Tuesday, and I think there were actual rocket missile warning sirens going off. I mean,
yeah, apparently this
I don't know.
And Wednesday, I'm going to get the exact number wrong, but I think we're in the teens, if not more. North Korea launched a large number of rockets all in one day.
I think it was like 20, 25 rockets.
Over 20, yeah. Well, this is not normal behavior. And then overnight, we've got to think where we are time zones, but their time on Thursday evening, I guess, they seem to have had an IBCM, sort of serious one, blow up and not work properly. So what's driving this?
Well, there was a big drill between. I mean, there was training the U.S. and South Korean militaries in advance of this. But I mean, the people in North Korea, the leadership reads the newspapers as well. Maybe there's some kind of other economic deal at play here that they also need commodities. They also need food, and they're also dealing with inflation. So is it just blackmail by rocket testing?
Yeah, and also there's this standard technique if things are grim at home, redirect people's attention overseas. I mean, I don't think that the North Korean regime has to worry too much about the electorate, but nevertheless, they like the idea that they can, deflect from any problems at home. So whether they're suffering from this global inflation and global slowdown, I don't know. But it's very difficult to discern.
Well, it's a pretty dire place in general. So I would think, their largest export market is China. So if China's slowing down, you got to think it's impacting North Korea. Then getting which on this before we went on live. What is China's role in this? Whenever my experience with the Chinese, when they talk about North Korea, my understanding is the North Koreans think they've got the better form of communism, and they're not like those sellouts in Beijing who are, capitalist communists. So Chinese diplomats always are like, basically suggesting they have no control over North Korea, which is odd because the rocket testing always goes towards Japan. It never goes towards China, which is quite interesting. Is China involved? I mean, why can't China ring these guys in?
I think whether it just suits the Chinese to have world focus on Pyongyang as the sort of naughty boy in class, and that nobody's pointing the finger at China, because we talk constantly on here about the Rocket Man, but we don't really talk about, let's be frank, the concentration camps in China with the Uyghurs and other minorities, and still quite a brutal regime in Tibet, and that gets very, very little airtime or press coverage. It's in the background and people are aware of it, and now and again you get a long documentary report, but it's not front and center in the way all this sort of missile nonsense is. I would have thought, to be honest, if the Chinese wanted to change regime in North Korea, I think they could probably do that very easily, but it kind of suits them to have this sort of
porcupine,
exactly that. And but at a we're not living there, but it must be alarming if you're in Japan now, if this stuff is getting closer and closer.
100%. One of the books I'm going to talk about again, but Japan does have a pacifist constitution, but that doesn't mean there aren't elements in Japan. Did I say China? I said Japan is a pacifist. What did I say? You know what I'm saying? Japan, pacifist constitution. But that doesn't mean elements in Japan aren't, pro-military or want to expand their military effort.
That's true.
These rockets only give more credence for the Japanese saying, hey, we got to do something. And if one of these, I mean, it's already landed in their territory. God forbid if it actually lands on their land. It doesn't seem like Japan's going to stand by. It does seem like they're going to flip the switch, and then we've got a full-on arm race in that part of the world.
I just hope the North Korean navigation systems are quite good, that they don't hit Russia, because as you know, Russia, there's this disputed islands in the north of Japan that Russians have occupied since the Second World War. Lord knows what the reaction would be if it's probably pretty unoccupied. I don't think it's going to hurt anybody as such. But, if a bit of steaming hot metal arrives on the beach somewhere, what Mr. Putin would think of it, I do not know. But so I think you're right. The porcupine is quite a good analogy. It's kind of prickly and you want to stay away from it. But at the end of the day, is it really going to do huge damage? I would have thought hopefully not, unless something goes seriously wrong, which is, of course, what the worry must be if you're President of the United States. You can't take it out of the in-tray. It's front and center there all the time, I would have thought.
No, for sure, because it would demand immediate attention, and it would also require thinking about the 4 or 5 next steps of what would happen if you were to actually have to respond in kind. So
I think it's also interesting. We're talking about this is right too, but how Ukraine is slightly fading. There's still quite a lot of coverage, but we settled into this sort of First World War scenario. One thing I read an article the other day that a lot of countries are using it as, and this is quite a dreadful way of thinking about it, as a sort of weapons testing area. So you've got the Turks have done extremely well with their drones. Now the Iranians are supplying drones to the Russians. The Israelis are supplying anti-drone technology, as are the United States and the UK. And the United States are offering more and more sophisticated weapons. So it's sort of turned in the most horrible and brutal way into a sort of sales opportunity as well, which is an extraordinary way of putting it. But there's a foreign involvement now in this war.
No, but it can't be ignored, and it's super important. And China hasn't been to war since the 70s, so that also plays into the calculus. They're studying this. The Russians seem to be fighting a war from Napoleonic era. I mean, they haven't sped up. So it is one of the downsides of war, is that there is testing always going on, people learning. I think, though.
I think the Russian military reputation's taken a hell of a hit this year, or whatever happens. Are they down to which is what they've always done in major wars in the past, is rely on the weather and sheer numbers.
Yeah.
Whether they have got the political clout to be able to do the sheer numbers, I don't know. Whether Putin could put, I don't know, 1 million people into the army and be a meaningful force, I think may be open to doubt. So I think their reputation in the league table of military powers has faded quite a lot.
Well, I think an event to watch is actually the G20 summit, which is due to start a week or a few weeks. I guess 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, the November 15th.
Yeah.
Putin is supposed to be there. There's going to be huge pressure in the back rooms. You're seeing more and more of it. I mean, I think the coverage out of Ukraine is definitely depleted. It's gotten lessened, but there's been more talk about, the off-ramp, settling this thing, forcing some kind of resolution, etc. So I don't know. Maybe the G20 is going to be that event when they're hanging out in Bali. That'll bring the world's leaders together, and they'll figure out a way to bring some peace to this part of the world for Christmas.
Wow.
That sounds like a Beatles song.
I was going to say, it also sounds like another big opportunity for your absolute number one sort of celebrity politician, Monsieur Macron. This is very much up his street.
Where's Macron, Ben? He's probably he's getting ready. Yeah,
he's getting a Bali photo shoot together, I would think, probably. A few palm trees in Elysee Palace.
I wonder if Macron can run in 2024, if we can change the U.S. Constitution.
You'd have to. Well, they have changed the presidential constitutions before, wasn't it? I think it was Giscard who changed it from 7 years to 5. So,
well, I'm saying changing the U.S. Constitution. You have to be born in the. Sorry. You have to be born in the U.S. to be president.
Yeah. Oh well, you'd like him to run? Well,
sure. Why not? Why not?
There'd be loads of people. Tony Blair would want to run straight away.
Why not?
And
they all have. That could be. Do you have experience running? A leading country?
Well, hang on. I tell you, who's quite close is your other great friend, which is Boris. I mean, he was actually born in New York. He was born in New York, but he revoked his.
Well, he had to, right? But Rishi doesn't. He has a green card. I actually don't think America's prepared for Boris too much.
I don't know what sort of would he. And this is going back a long way. Would he be like one of those sort of southern Bible
Huey Long types? Populist.
Sort of Huey Long type populist from the 20s and 30s that would G people up. I don't know quite what the Americans would make of it, to be honest.
I think Boris, running around diners in New Hampshire would be quite the sight to start.
In the snows of New Hampshire. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. All right. Now that we've depressed everybody and lost all our viewership, let's finish up with something positive, what we're reading and watching. Gerald, do you want to go first?
Well, this is going to be a bit downbeat because I trailed it a couple of weeks ago. Sorry about this. I watched the film All Quiet on the Western Front. It's actually a German film, and in German with English subtitles. It's extremely good with two small caveats. One is it's rather long. I don't know if I'm turning out to be a bit elderly, but 2.5 hours of film is kind of more than enough, and it doesn't need to be 2.5 hours long. And also, it sort of slipped into the genre that is now well-worn territory on both sides of, sort of innocent young lads are blown to bits and they wish they weren't there. Of course, the original book and film, that was the original story, so it sits with them. It sits quite well in comparison with the other film that came out a few years ago, 1917, and it's a similar genre. So I would recommend it, and I think it's actually good in German. I mean, I only speak a very small amount of German, very badly. I kind of scraped a couple of exams in German, but it adds to the atmosphere. It just gives it a level of authenticity, a little bit like the famous submarine film now nearly 40 years ago, Das Boot, again in German with British subtitles.
Yeah, but absolute classic. Yeah,
and that is an absolute classic film. Is this in the same genre or the same level? Possibly. I don't think it's quite there, but I would certainly recommend people watch it. I saw it on Netflix, and I think it's on for some time.
I asked my wife if she wanted to watch it with me. She said no. This is decidedly.
It's solo.
It's a
graphic.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm keen to watch it. And my next Bachelor at Home night, it's in the queue.
Well, on a more optimistic note, a second one to trail to people, which I have watched, but I won't absorb too much time. Another Netflix one. This one's a Netflix documentary on rock drummers called Count Me In. And every lunatic who has played in a rock band is sort of featured in this really quite fascinating documentary of about, I think it's just over an hour of some of the leading guys and their techniques and how they got where they were, and those who've done well and those who've kind of gone completely mad. And it kind of fascinating, even from a layman's point of view, a certain amount of their technique and all the rest of it. So you've got some highly technical drummers like Stuart Copeland from The Police comes to mind. Maybe just more aggressive drumming, you've got people like Dave Grohl and all the rest of it. So it's a good sort of head banging evening for, I don't know, an hour and a quarter. And it's called Count Me In. So I would recommend that one.
I love it. Drummers are the best.
Yeah. So that leaves us with what am I reading? And I took this off the bookshelf again, and it's a good time to talk about it because, in fact, you and we had to sort out when we were broadcasting today because the clocks have changed. And they've changed here, but they haven't changed with you.
Well, they haven't. Yeah, they haven't changed in the most important time zone on the planet.
Well, they've changed in London, and I'm struggling to think of anywhere else that comes close, frankly. And this book, which is called The Calendar, there we are. It's quite a thick. It's a little book.
Is it 365 pages?
Yeah. Oh, do you know?
See what I did there?
That would be no, but it's a hell of a lot of pages.
2 on the nose. 365.
What is interesting about it is, there's the technique of how do you measure the day and weeks. And, the French Revolution tried to have 10-day weeks, and that sort of ended in tears. And the various systems of watching the stars and the calendar starts to emerge. And then, again, this feels like one of your favorite dictums, politics emerges. So people, the calendar becomes a very political thing, both in, the church and all the rest of it. And Roman emperors had a habit of trying to name themselves after some of the months. Famously, Julius Caesar, in July, and of course Augustus Caesar quickly invented August, and it pretty much goes from when people first looked up at the sky and noticed the sun moving around to the atomic clock. So, as I say, it's called The Calendar, and it's by a guy called David Ewing Duncan, an American journalist. It's a very good, comprehensive read as to how it all works, or doesn't quite work sometimes.
I love those kind of books. That's no, I need to read that. It's fascinating. But yeah, there's always science and then the politics.
Yeah,
how we organize our world.
Things start quite well, then politics gets involved, and then before you know it, the lawyers arrive, don't they? Because they're going to have to argue over what the politicians actually said. But it's maybe more than you need to know about time and dates and clocks and everything. But it's a very good book.
Impossible. You can't know enough about calendars. So I'm back. I'm just about to finish this book. I can't recommend this enough. Asia's Reckoning. It's really about the history of China and Japan. I've learned a lot about Japan. Fascinating. Richard McGregor.
You mentioned it last time, and I just ordered it on Amazon a couple of days ago, so I might report in at some stage.
Oh, good. It's a Richard McGregor, fantastic, really good book. I'm going to do something a little bit more fun for my next book. I'm going to read Detroit by Charlie LaBeouf, who is a gonzo Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. He writes about the dark underbelly, the excitement that is Detroit. So this should be fun. Charlie LaBeouf is a pretty colorful guy, so colorful that he was asked to leave his recent employer, which was a television show in a local media outlet in Detroit. But no, it should be fun. Detroit's a wild place. So my hometown, my birthplace. So I'm looking to read about this.
I'm going to mix these two up, and you're going to get very annoyed with me. But there was a very famous sort of gonzo journalist stroke or historian called Studs Terkel.
Yeah.
But was he Chicago rather than Detroit? He basically stopped people in the street and asked them about current affairs and this, that, and the other. But he was around, I think, from the 60s to the 80s and was quite a pioneer. But I was going to say, he's Detroit, but now I'm thinking he may have been in Chicago.
Long-running radio show in Chicago.
So well.
And he died in Chicago. Well. Yeah. So yeah.
But yeah, any of that sort of social history, different angle of looking at things is, I always think, the stuff that lasts. So I know when we're kids in the States, you learn all the presidents, we do kings and queens and all that stuff. But the older and kind of broader view you take of life, the more you find, I think, the social history is the stuff that's really interesting. I think. Yeah,
just talking to like the cab drivers, the restaurateurs, the wait staff, people kind of working, driving the city, people that are doing the sanitation, like they actually know what the hell's going on, not these highfalutin hotshot CEOs. You got to get into with the people. So that's, the book was about that. So yeah, I'm sure the Studs Terkel, same kind of vibe.
Yeah, similar genre, I think.
So I've been watching a lot of sports lately. The World Series is on, which has been a lot of fun to watch. Not a huge fan of baseball, but for some reason I'm captivated by the World Series. Maybe because the stakes are so high. It's the final championship. Stadiums are packed. I don't know, a lot of pageantry. So that's been fun. Houston is up 3-2. It's going back down to Texas. They're probably going to win. Houston Astros. But a show I've been watching, which is kind of an interesting premise. Richard Grant, actor, I think he's a British actor, right? Kind of a B-list actor. I feel like he's always a baddie in these movies. But this is a BBC show called Right Around the World. What's interesting about this show, he goes obviously fun places in Spain, France, Italy, because if you're going to write about the world, that is the world, right? So he goes to these places. But what's interesting, it's a travel show, but it's also a literary show. He takes books that are tied into the region, both fiction, nonfiction, and says, hey, this book was written here. Here's the place. I don't know, kind of a fun travel show to combine literature and travel and adventure. So I think it's a few years old, but I don't know. It's a good show to watch, kind of relax when you're want to renew yourself in humanity and not be depressed by all the craziness that we're dealing with.
I think there's a move towards these sort of, I don't know how you describe them, cross-disciplinary type travel shows. You take there's one with an Italian chef and British
Andrew Graham Dixon. Great show.
Yeah, and which we talked about before. And there are two or three of these going around. There's an Australian chef over here whose name escapes me for the moment, but he's just done a similar travel show. A fascinating program on Argentina and basically the cuisine of Argentina, which is pretty straightforward, really. You find a piece of beef and you kind of barbecue it, basically, and no piece of beef is too big. And but it was nevertheless a guy is obviously looking at the culinary side of things. John Turode, his name's come to me now. John Turode.
Yeah, I like that idea of, like, you're right, cross. Like taking architecture, art, travel, adventure, literature. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's true. So that's cheerful for another couple of weeks.
Gerald, before we go, did you know, speaking of the G20, that Argentina is in the G20?
No, I didn't. But this is another one of these horrible quiz questions. Because
it is in the G20. I was quite surprised.
I'm amazed. I mean,
it's an actual member of the G20 as opposed to, like, the Netherlands is being invited to this meeting in Indonesia.
Right.
But I don't know. They're a member of the G20. Argentina.
Yeah. Are there any other surprise ones? I'm trying to think. Is there somebody on? Is it purely on size of economy, or is it done? I don't know.
My understanding was all economy, but maybe
New Zealand isn't in it. Presume is it? I don't know. I mean, how big or small do you have to be, and what the criteria are? But I have a rule about these things that if everybody, just think about it, right? If everybody wants to speak for a quarter of an hour, 5 hours of the day it's got. So how on earth do these meetings really achieve very much unless they've pretty much agreed it before they jump on a plane and meet?
God, you're so down on the elites, man. That's where it's at. New Zealand is not a member.
Too small. Australia is, like, it must be.
Australia's a member, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I would need to find the Argentina. I'm surprised Chile's not bigger than
Nigeria. Is Nigeria a member?
Nigeria is not a member.
Yeah, no, that surprises me. When you think,
in fact, South Africa is the only African nation on the list.
Yeah, because Nigeria and South Africa are very similar in size as economies. I mean, somebody is going to correct me. I think I'm right in saying Nigeria might be slightly bigger.
I think we've landed on our next TV show.
Oh,
G20 travel adventure. Like, why aren't we going to Bali to talk about, hotels, lodging, where these elites are going to eat?
We could go to all these countries and then express surprise that they're in the G20. That would go down.
That actually could be fun. Like, we land at customs and we ask, are you a G20 country? If they say no, we promptly leave.
Yeah. I presume you're having a private jet to do all of this. There's no trivial problems with booking tickets to get out of the country or anything.
Private. I mean, I didn't realize there's other ways to fly, you're suggesting.
Who's got a lot of money who doesn't know what to spend it on? Why don't we approach Elon Musk? Here's a man who spent $45 billion on Twitter. Am I missing something? But how on earth is he going to make any money out of that?
Speaking of debt payments, my understanding, his debt payment is $1 billion a year.
Yeah. I guess he's watching interest rates quite closely.
Hopefully he doesn't have an arm. I think, listen, man, Twitter's the future. He's going to figure it out. E-commerce, super app.
I can now see the world according to Ross, and this is a sort of a wind-up point of today's show, I think. It's Musk Macron is the future.
I would bet on Macron first. I think listen, man, I think he'll figure out Twitter. I don't know. It does seem like he paid a lot of money for it, though.
Well, 5% interest rates, you kind of would expect to get a return of what? $2.25 billion a year in profits. I think that's going to be a stretch, to say the very least.
I mean, to drop literally $100 million a month, a little less than that, for interest.
That's kind of
that's a real number. That seems like a real number.
That's kind of serious money. And then the other thing that we started trailing during this show this year, and is coming more and more obvious, is the rise of the T word, trillion. You know, we're in the, British government spending is heading towards a trillion. We're in the 920 billion pounds or whatever. So that'll be a trillion in no time at all. And if you're not in the trillions, you're nowhere soon, I think is my general view.
All right. Well, that was fantastic. I'm still not giving up on our friends at RII Italia.
Oh, I have.
We can't give up on Italy.
I feel shunned by them now, but there we are.
I think it's going to happen. Gerald, great to see you, man. We'll see you in a few weeks with a new Congress, a new government in the U.S.
And 18 months of political mayhem to come.
By the way, breaking news. It sounds like Trump's going to announce on November 14th. I thought he was going to announce on the 15th.
He's beaten you by a day.
On the Twitter machine, he's saying the 14th. So
we'll know in 2 weeks.
What a country. What a time to be alive. Thank God this is all, in the metaverse and it doesn't matter.
Take care.
Ciao.